Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you have joined us from today. My name is Uyi Stewart, Chief Data and Technology Officer at data.org. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar that is focused on unlocking data to advance impact. While privacy enhancing technologies have been around for a while, they have largely been a frontier technology that only a select number of regulators and a few companies in the private sector have had an interest in exploring and the luxury of doing so. But that has changed in recent years. At the global level, the G7 Data Protection and Privacy Authorities in 2023 endorsed a plan that included promoting the development and use of emerging technologies, including PETs, that can build trust in data sharing and protect privacy. At data.org, we believe in the transformative potential of privacy enhancing technologies, which we're going to keep calling PETs for in this webinar, to unlock financial data for public health, ensuring both privacy and impact. Today, we would explore how PETs address data access challenges while driving financial inclusion and fostering equitable ecosystems. We are thrilled to have three international experts in our panel today, and I'd like to introduce them. First, John Derico. He is a vice president at MasterCard in charge of data sourcing and emerging technologies. Next is Salil Vardhan, who is a professor of computer science and applied mathematics, and also the faculty director, OpenDP at Harvard University. And by no means the least is Shubham Kumar, who is a research scholar at IIT Kanpur in India. I'm excited to now dive into today's discussion on the power of data for social good. And I'd like to start with you first, John. You are leading the team that is defining MasterCard's role in data sourcing, emerging technologies, and PET's impact on financial services. MasterCard has been a leader in data sourcing and privacy enhancing technology adoption. Now, the question to you, John, is what is MasterCard's vision or strategy for PETs? And how does this ensure data privacy while unlocking financial transaction data to support public health decision-making and other risk-led use cases?
Okay, cool. First, thank you. So happy to be able to speak here today and share some ideas and spur some follow-up conversations. So to set context, MasterCard is a global technology company in the payments industry, and we provide solutions to people as well as organizations all around the world. And part of the question you mentioned really ties to our mission. It's our mission to connect, empower, an inclusive digital economy that benefits everyone everywhere. And for us, it's making transactions safe, simple, smart, and accessible. Now, with this context, the privacy technology leadership that we have has been going back quite a while because we've been expanding our data profile for over, almost like 60 years to help make commerce work more efficiently. And it's always been about safety, security, and trust, which is really at the basis of a lot of the work we do here at PETS. And PETS is part of our proper innovation, and they support both privacy, utility, but also transparency. And there's really three parts we think about, to your point about the vision, the strategy, and the availability. So, Yuri, as you mentioned, part of the vision, think about if you can seamlessly use data for innovation while being comfortable that they are privacy compliant, but yet automated with flexible frameworks. And then secondly, that strategy, it's a bit of an overused word, but it still is incredibly important. How do you have the availability of tools to democratize access to an ecosystem of PETs versus some single one-off solutions? And then from there, by doing so, how do we enable the explainability plus the needed governance so we can all work together in a simple, flexible, nimble manner? And then lastly, availability. how do we ensure that the privacy with utility make insights available for research, for use cases such as this, but also those use cases with the specific controls, and that data privacy is ensured with privacy by design via our governance frameworks that take a privacy-first lens with the needed controls. And that's where we think about the vision and strategy and availability as it ties to our mission.
Thank you so much, John, for laying out in an excellent way MasterCard's vision for how you plan to use data to support innovation and democratize access through a pets ecosystem. Let me now turn to Salil. Salil, in addition to your day job as a professor of computer science and applied mathematics, you are also the faculty director of OpenDP Open Source Software Project. As a globally recognized expert in privacy enhancing technologies, specifically differential privacy, which is considered by some to be the gold standard, my question to you is, why is this the case? And can you explain how differential privacy is enabling interdisciplinary collaboration, especially in public health and financial inclusion?
Great, great to be here on the panel with you, Yui, and John and Shubham, and looking forward to talking about these questions and hearing questions from the audience later as well. So, differential privacy is the PET, the privacy enhancing technology that's in my expertise and area of greatest interest. And OpenDP that we mentioned stands for Open Differential Privacy. So we are building open source software to enable and democratize, as John said, the use of differential privacy in particular as a privacy enhancing technology. Now, differential privacy is sometimes, and I think justifiably referred to as a gold standard, but not as that shouldn't be necessarily in contrast with other privacy enhancing technologies, but rather it's a gold standard for the purpose that it's intended to solve, which I'll elaborate on in a moment. And it's complementary to other privacy technologies used in conjunction together with differential privacy to address other concerns about privacy and trust. So differential privacy is concerned with how do you make sure that the data you actually share, the data you release, the statistics you publish, the machine learning models you train, how do you make sure that those only reflect the population that they're developed on or trained on, and not reflect information about specific individuals in the data? Okay, so other privacy enhancing technologies are about the process of how do you produce that model in a way that doesn't require different entities to pool their data together in one place, for example. So they addressed other trust issues and how you compute on sensitive data. But differential privacy is concerned with the thing that you produce at the end, that you publish, that you make available. How do you make sure that that's not too disclosive? And the way it does this is by introducing carefully calibrated amounts of random noise into statistical computations, into the training of machine learning models, so that information about specific individuals is obscured, but signal about the population as a whole still comes through. And the reason, and it's the only systematic theory we have, way of reasoning about these kinds of statistical releases, that allows us to be sure that when kind of all of the things that we publish in aggregate can't be combined to start reconstructing information about individuals. And the ways that people have tried to do this in a more ad hoc fashion in the past have repeatedly been shown to fail. Now, so why does differential privacy lead to interdisciplinary collaboration? The reason is you get the most bang for the buck when it's really tailored to the intended use of the data. And that's going to be very different if it's a a public health researcher studying the data to understand how disease might be transmitted or to the effect of a lockdown order, or if it's an economist understanding relationships between parental income and their child's future income for understanding economic mobility. And so tailoring the where you introduce noise, which statistics you choose to publish, how granular you make those, which ones you prioritize for accuracy, that to do that in the best way possible to make the most effective use of the data while providing strong protections of privacy requires privacy experts and differential privacy experts to work together with the domain experts who are going to be analyzing the data.
Thank you. Thank you, Salil. So John, you laid out for us how a private sector organization releases data to support innovation, right? And Salil has come to talk about how do you ensure that data that is released only surface the right variables. Now I'd like to ground this conversation a little bit and turn to Shubham, who's on this call. Shubham, you and your colleagues from IIIT Kanpur are one of the 4 finalists in our Pets for Public Health Challenge that was focused on using transactional open source data, differential privacy, and machine learning to inform epidemiological models for public health in Colombia and eventually in India. My question to you is, can you walk us through how this data has been used to model pandemic behavior and identify potential hotspots?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, E, and I'm great to be here. So, privacy-enhanced technologies allows us to access abundance of transaction data stored by bank and payment systems with their spatio-temporal properties without compromising the contributors' privacy. Privacy-enhanced transaction data can give us insight about real-time transactional behavior of the people. This transactional behavior can be utilized to improve the epidemiological analysis. During pandemic, various phases of pandemic, people's transactional behavior changes drastically. For example, there is a usual shift in expenditure from luxurious goods towards more essential items. So these changes in expenditure patterns can be has been used to model the pandemic behavior. Now, the spatial property of transaction data can be used to visualize the transaction going on at various zip code levels. Now, more the transaction going in an area, more there is a chance of interaction between the people, and hence there is higher chance of spread of disease. So the economic hotspot is directly linked with potential pandemic hotspots. So this is the way we have tried to model our pandemic behavior and hotspot using the transactional data. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubham. So we've gone through a landscape that actually is end-to-end. That is the data originator, the data processing, and then the data user, which is in this case Shubham. I'd like to now take the conversation to the next level of engagement or details by looking at some of the challenges and environment for implementing this PET technology. So I'd like to start with you, John, again, if you don't mind. For companies still in the early stages of their PET journey, how can they balance the areas of ethics, risk, value, and growth in its approach? And then let me tack on one more question, John. Also, how has MasterCard piloted PETS, a required governing framework, and a set of integrated PETS capabilities made available within the data clean room?
Well, that's a big sandwich of ethics, risk, value, and growth. Okay, so if you think about it, so for where to start, what worked for us is to take a privacy-first approach with the PET strategy and understanding, what we were looking to solve and why, versus starting with the how and the technologies. That's a super important thing. And then when it comes down to the right mix of stakeholders along the way, based on your data, as well as your use cases. So that's the first part of the start. And then when we think about this, we also established early on a PETS governance group. And that governance group, that cross-sectional group, helps not only with the evaluations and the pilots, but also the paths to production and the supporting thought leadership that we need to have for education, both internally and externally. The second part of this is when we think about what does a governing framework unlock? It takes into account all these various stakeholders with specific gating mechanisms, but then the tricks, how do you do that in a flexible, repeatable, data-driven process? So the framework itself is stakeholder-driven. So for example, as we were talking before about different types of PET technologies and the latter, how do we think about this as a PETS ecosystem? And with that ecosystem, and the ecosystem has different capabilities that can be leveraged for various use cases. So what's really cool is that we can see where multiple PETs can be used. So for example, a data clean room may be a way to execute, but it may not be the only way, and other technologies may be needed. So that framework really helps with that privacy first approach, as well as that right set of stakeholders along the way, as we're working through the evaluations and the paths, but also working through production.
That's excellent. I love the concept of a PETS ecosystem. Salil, I'm going to come to you now. So building on John's remarks, can you please explain how the historical trade-offs between privacy and utility are addressed through differential privacy as one of the leading PETS technique?
Great. Yes, happy to do so, and it kind of builds off the remarks that I made in response to your first question. But maybe even before that, just to piggyback on John's remarks about the clean room. That's a perfect example of a setting in which what you execute, so the clean room is your execution environment that provides certain like protections and boundaries where data can only flow in a controlled way. And differential privacy is one of the technologies that gives you tools for what to actually compute in the clean room and what to allow to cross over that boundary from the clean room to the outside. So a great example of kind of how things in different technologies in that ecosystem work together. So privacy versus utility, as I mentioned earlier, so differential privacy is kind of premised on kind of one of the fundamental truths about data privacy, and that is that you cannot milk data arbitrarily, produce an arbitrary amount of analyses, publish an arbitrary amount of statistics, train arbitrarily large or many models, machine learning models on the same data without exposing yourself to serious vulnerabilities. And this has been, again, shown repeatedly. The US Census Bureau realized that the way that it was publishing tables in the 2010 census and earlier was vulnerable to this, because they were publishing so many statistics all on the same data set collected by the population. And this happens in the tech industry as well. And what differential privacy provides is a quantitative theory for reasoning about how much privacy loss is there incurred with each additional publication. And it allows you to trade off how accurately do I publish, the statistics, how much utility do I get from this machine learning model against the hit to privacy. And it allows you to stop and draw a boundary and say, this is my budget. I am not willing to expose the subjects of the data, the people that we're analyzing, to greater privacy risks than that. And so that's how differential privacy provides us with a way to deal with that privacy utility trade-off and to think about it systematically.
Thank you, Salil. This is progressing nicely. So John, you gave us this concept of the pet ecosystem and motivated the idea of a clean room. And Salil, you've cautioned us now from the differential privacy perspective that you cannot, and I love your phrase, you cannot milk data arbitrarily without being exposed to serious vulnerabilities, right? So let me ground it again, right, as I did in the first round, and come to you, Shubham, right? And ask a question based on your participation in our challenge. With some concrete examples or use cases, can you provide an overview of how financial transaction data can effectively support public health, illustrating the power of cross-domain decision-making scenarios, including understanding relations between random variables or making predictions about the future?
Yeah. So transaction data, particularly in the expenditure category of transportation and commuting, can be used to infer mobility, which has its great use in new cases prediction forecasting. So this financial data can be modeled with some added parameters, can be used to forecast new cases. Now, let's talk about another case. Financial data can provide us an insight into how policies implemented during a pandemic affects the normal people's behavior. So, for example, during COVID-19, due to closure of large establishment has larger impact on people's spending than compared to social distancing norms. Now, talking about another case, social groups can further be associated with expenditure categories, and through that, there is a way to on which we are still working. There are way to estimate the contact matrices. So that has a great use in epidemiology. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Shubham. I would like to welcome those who've joined us to start to think about your questions as we go through the final round of questions to the panelists now. So please use the chat and submit any questions you might have. John, here is my third and final question to you. Could you please provide some examples of how insights from MasterCard data could create equitable financial ecosystems?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned before, our mission to connect, empower, an inclusive digital economy that benefits everyone, everywhere. Talked about that before. But a part of that, how we in other companies can leverage capabilities that are designed to, think about it this way, identify, quantify, but also mitigate bias in data sets. Because that's the basis of what Salil and others are going to be using these data sets for. And it's not just to ensure that these models aren't producing biases, but also to assess and address if the underlying data sets themselves are biased. So starting there at that base really gets thinking about how this, with our mission, can support the equitable financial ecosystems in looking at the core data itself and what we can all do to identify but also mitigate bias.
Excellent. That's great. I'm going to turn to you, Salil, because there's to mitigate that bias, we need to do some serious filtering, right? So what challenges have you encountered in applying DP across different sectors? And how can we overcome these hurdles to maximize the impact of pets?
Yeah, great. Every domain in which we bring privacy, try to bring privacy enhancing technologies raises new challenges. And some of these are like the bias issues that John was talking about. Others are around what are the ways in which people in a particular domain need to analyze the data. What kind of signal is most important to preserve and what is less important? Because making those choices, as we said, is part of getting the most bang for your buck out of privacy enhancing technologies and differential privacy in particular. We can't make the data available for all purposes, again, without exposing ourselves to serious vulnerabilities. So the way to tackle that challenge is to have groups like Shubham's group and the other participants in the PETS challenge being creative and innovative in developing what are the best ways to use this kind of data for a particular societal good, for public health, to understand what signal can we take advantage of and what are the creative ways in which we can draw insights from it. And then the other thing I would just conclude with from our experience throughout deploying differential privacy and PETS is every new sector that you bring the technology to, there comes with also just the unfamiliarity with that technology. The laws and regulations and policies of organizations are not yet set up to make decisions in light of using that technology. And so there can be a lot of healthy friction that makes it difficult in those first deployments of a technology in a new domain. And we've certainly encountered that, as all of our organizations try to work together on the PETS challenge, Harvard included. There's a lot of caution whenever dealing with sensitive data for good reason. But I think if we repeat this process multiple times, we build up that experience, others in the same sector can look to these examples and best practices start to develop where in the future there won't be so much friction.
Thank you, Salil. For those in the audience, again, I welcome you to please submit any questions you may have for us. John, I said it was my final question to you. I lied. So bear with me. I'm going to ask you one more question, building on Salil's last point. And MasterCard has been a great partner for the PETS work that we're collaborating on with Harvard and others. So I'd like to ask you, what's next for MasterCard in terms of working with partners to safely use MasterCard's data through PETS?
Okay, so what's next? A handful of things to keep it coherent. So one, we need to continue the innovation and leadership in this space while being focused on the pilots and the availability of these solutions to enterprises as well as nonprofits and NGOs. So then that's sort of one. Then two, how do we keep up with our partners in the privacy tech space to leverage their services? Then there gets into the systemization. So there are many ways to use our insights with customers and partners, but it needs to be conscious that there's trust in both directions, and that could be problematic. So how can we continue to seek to move controls that used to be, contractual up to being systematized in specific PET deliverables? As I mentioned, things like in the clean rooms and such, really make that more data available. And lastly, and Sil mentioned this before, there's a level of transparency in the privacy tech area that is super, super important. So how do we continue that thought leadership underway to meet the burdens of privacy, the row, confidentiality, the set, but also transparency of that end result? And it's that transparency where we want to combat that PETS can be understood in a non-superficial way, which is more about, it could be at times almost plausible deniability or a type of, I use the phrase, privacy theater versus its true benefits. And that's where eventually that transparency is super helpful and that understandability of the solutions themselves.
That's great. Actually, I'm glad I asked you that question because now I can come back to Shubham, right? Because we can imagine that transparency is important in implementing PETS on the ground level across organizations around the world, especially in the global south. And so my question to you, Shubham, is based on the concept of localism, how will your PETS tool enable real-time insights for local health officials, such as those in Bogota, in Colombia, or New Delhi, India, while ensuring data privacy? And critically, what are key learnings from your project that can be applied globally?
Yeah. So our developed PET tool uses differential privacy to preserve the contributors' privacy. As Salil has well defined the differential privacy. Basically, using this, we add mathematically calculated noise to preserve the privacy in statistical release. In our case, we are taking a merchant as our privacy unit. So we are securing the merchants at the merchant level. Now, the local health officials and government can utilize their own local transactional data to get real-time insight into potential hotspots. They can also get insight into how the pandemic is progressing, in which stage it is currently in. There are broadly 3 stages: the onset, the peak stage, and the recovery stage. Through these insights, they can take a better decision about what are the policies they need to implement in their local area. Now, talking about the global idea is that we have learned is PET is a very promising, strong tool through which we can access large volumes of data which were inaccessible due to privacy concerns. And this can be used to build tools, methods, and functions, including those we are building here to help epidemiologists and policymakers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shubham. I'm going to stay still on the ground level in the driving this concept of localism, especially how we think about PETs and its implementation for those in the global south or in low middle income countries. So Salil, my question is directed to you, if you don't mind. What innovations do you think will drive the future of PETs, especially for developing countries?
Great. So it's one of the things that was very much our motivation for starting the OpenDP project, and relates to how John spoke earlier about democratizing PETs. So when we started the project 5 years ago, the only organizations that were making use of differential privacy were large, very well-resourced, high expertise organizations in first world countries in the US. So like the US Census Bureau, with enormous statistical expertise built up over a century or more, experience in disclosure avoidance, big tech companies like Google, Apple, and Microsoft, of course, with enormous amount of technical expertise. And if any other organization, even ones that are in the technology space, wanted to try to adopt these technologies, they were stuck starting from ground level, complete blank slate. They had to even redo the basics themselves, and it's very hard to get those right. Much less, the whole education piece of understanding what is the possible value that you can get from this technology, what does it protect, how do you use it safely?
Salil,
yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be abrupt, but John has an emergency, and he has to drop off. This is the world we live in right now.
I apologize, team. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the rest of this event and making more data and capabilities available and wrapping up the rest of this challenge in the future in front of us. Guys, thank you so much and really appreciate everybody's insight on this.
Thank you, John.
Bye, John.
Salil, I'm sorry to just butt in, but it was an emergency that he has to step away. Yeah.
No worries. I'll wrap up quickly. So,
no, take your time. I don't see an audience question yet.
Okay.
But this is important because I've just looked through the list of those who are joining us on this webinar, and there is a good number of folks from the Global South. And I'm sure they're thinking, is this another Global North technology? What is the value and relevance of pets in my environment? That's why I'm asking you this question.
Yes. So where I was getting to is at least one piece of the puzzle is to have tools that are in place, that are trustworthy, that are open source, and that are easily adoptable by organizations that don't have necessarily prior experience with these technologies, don't have the resources to hire a team to build their own custom pets or differential privacy solution. And so that's that, and along with a wide resource, a set of educational materials that allow decision makers to understand the value of these, for policies of organizations to be put in, give guidance of best practices for how to use this technology. Those are some of the kinds of things that we're trying to do with OpenDP, the Open Differential Privacy Project. Of course, that's not in itself, just producing the materials, not enough. There also needs to be active engagement, and one group that is trying to spread the use of privacy enhancing technologies globally is the United Nations Privacy Enhancing Technologies Lab, the UN PET Lab, which we are engaged with, but involves representatives from national statistical organizations around the world. And there are experiments, prototypes being built by, again, countries both in the global North and the global South. And so hopefully that's an example of what can also happen in other sectors to get adoption, again, to happen really globally and get the entire world to benefit from these technologies.
Thank you, Salil. In fact, there is an audience question that builds on what you just said. And I'd like to read out this question and start with you, Salil, and see, Shubham, if you have any thoughts. But first, Salil, this is from Colin Rice and says, I'm curious to hear about the relation of using pets, particularly with cross-sectoral data. Is enhanced or complicated by the emergence of national cross-sector data privacy regulations as opposed to sector-specific privacy regulations?
Great. That's definitely one of the hopes, that privacy enhancing technologies can help us cross those current boundaries, those data flow boundaries that currently prevent us from benefiting from the kinds of analyses that you can do if you combine data from different countries globally. And so one of the testbed prototypes that was done by the UN PET Lab that I mentioned earlier was a test case of international trade data done as a joint computation over data from many different countries. Again, it was just a test prototype, not on actual sensitive data, but kind of as a proof of concept that this can be done. So again, building the technology is just the first step. Then there needs to be getting regulators, decision makers to be comfortable with, to establish those best practices, and ideally have law and regulation adjusted so that when privacy enhancing technologies are used appropriately and they're to provide the kinds of protections that are needed, data can flow more easily for these kinds of cross-border uses.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Salil. Here's a question for you, Shubham, and thank you for being patient. He says, I love to hear what other applications could there be for using financial data to drive public health insights or outcomes, particularly in smaller scale contexts than a pandemic?
Yeah. So there can be many applications of the financial data, but we need two basic conditions for it. So first, there should be a trend shown by the financial data or the expenditure categories corresponding to that event. If the expenditure category shows that event, then definitely you can leverage it. The second condition is there should be enough data so that since we are adding noise and making it differentially private, then the data should be large enough to withstand that noise and still able to reflect the trend at whole population level. So yeah, sure, there can be many use cases, but it needs to be reflected by large population.
Excellent. Okay. Salil, do you have any thoughts on that as well? I knew it was directed to Shubham, but it's in your experience, especially from the DP side, what other applications have you seen, especially in the work that we're doing with you, where financial data can actually help to drive greater insights for things outside of pandemic, but for small scale context?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me mull on it a moment, and if I have a thought to add, sorry.
You bet. You
yes.
bet. While you're thinking, let me shoot one to Shubham as we sort of try to wrap up here. Along the same lines, Shubham, right? How can local governments or health officials benefit from the tools or the tool that you have developed in India specifically? How can it be applied and used in India by ministries of health officials?
Yeah, so local government can use our tool to get real-time insight into the hotspot detection. So by using this, they can adjust their policies about lockdown, or whether they need to impose lockdown on a certain area and whether they have to relax it. Another use is the how people's behavior is changing through the pandemic, how pandemic is progressing. So they can visualize how pandemic is progressing in separate areas, and they can see whether in some areas whether people is recovering more slowly, or whether in some areas people is recovering more fastly. So they can adjust their policies according to that.
Thank you. As we only have about a minute left, Salil, I'm going to turn back to you, but I'm going to add one more question to you, right? It's really, what is your call to action?
Great. Okay, so let me answer the earlier question, the use of other uses of financial transaction data. One example, which is potential example, is very similar to a recent use of OpenDP software by Microsoft. Is to understand sort of economic divide between different regions. So what Microsoft studied was digital literacy. How does the type of applications that users are using relate to the economic situation of the region that they live in? So are people in economically more well-off areas using different apps on their computers, on their phones, than ones in areas of poverty or that are economically less well-off? And one can imagine going beyond digital applications, but all kinds of domains of purchases and economic activity, and understand how this varies across different regions and demographic groups and socioeconomic classes. Call to action is for people to get involved. So OpenDP is one example of a community that you can join. You can join our Slack, our mailing list. And there are other communities trying to advance pets and bring them to different applications. And by working together on bringing it to new sectors, to new use cases of societal benefit, the technologies will advance and we will get greater experience on using them more effectively for greater good.
Thank you so much, Salil. We are at time, and another question just came in, but we are at time. But I want to thank you, Salil. I want to thank you, Shubham, and John, who was with us earlier, for sharing such outstanding insights. Personally, it is clear for me more than ever that privacy-enhancing technologies hold immense promise in supporting both financial inclusion and public health decision-making. I'm going to encourage everyone who has joined us today, just like Salil said in his call to action, to continue to explore communities that offer avenues for interdisciplinary collaboration so that we can unlock data to drive impact across all critical use cases. And this is the work that we do at data.org. I invite you to sign up for our newsletter and follow us online. Again, so grateful to all of you for participating and to the panelists. Have a good afternoon and good morning and good day to everyone. Bye.